My husband, Robert Davis, was having an affair with his secretary in his office. I reported him, and the entire company found out about his scandal. That afternoon, Robert Davis was docked pay, demoted, and had a public written reprimand from the board entered into his company file. Holding his written reprimand, I thought, Robert Davis, you really are a jinx. Could anyone be more unlucky than you? My husband, Robert Davis, and his female secretary were kissing in the office, and I caught them red-handed. That night, I instructed people to pack up his things, threw them out the door, and changed the lock on the main gate for good measure. And his secretary. She used to have a terrible attitude towards me when Robert Davis was around. I made one call to the HR manager and gave her a choice: resign or be fired. Resigning meant a clean exit, but being fired would include the reason for her departure in her personal file. Robert Davis exploded with rage on the phone. Sarah Reed, I've never met a woman as vicious as you. I'm divorcing you. Oh, I'm so scared, I said meekly into the phone. You have to keep your word, okay? The meeting place was set at a lawyer's office. Robert Davis and I had been together since we were teenagers and were also business partners. Robert Davis was furious. He told his lawyer, there's nothing to discuss. Just split the assets in the divorce. Robert Davis, red-faced with anger, suppressed his temper and directed his fury at the lawyer. Hurry up. I don't want this woman to bear my wife's name for another second. Robert Davis's lawyer was about to speak, but I cut him off first. I want assets, but not stocks, not funds, not cars, and not the shares in your name. I only want cash, or the houses will do. Before the lawyer could respond, Robert Davis scoffed. Sarah Reed, are you insane? He looked at me with disdain. Look at the things you've done. You reported me to the board, and you still want 70% of the assets. You don't deserve it. I reported you to the board because you cheated. Didn't I said with an earnest expression. Robert Davis's lawyer quickly interjected. Ms. Reed, do you have any proof that my client cheated? Please don't tell me you took pictures. A video recorded without my client's consent has no legal effect. If it's leaked, I will represent my client in pursuing legal action against you. Who says I don't have evidence? I immediately countered. Of course I do. I dug 2 crumpled pieces of paper out of my bag, placed them on the coffee table in the center, and humbly asked Robert Davis and his lawyer, do you think the board's public written reprimand counts as valid evidence? In an instant, the faces of Robert Davis and his lawyer changed completely. I maintained a sincere, humble attitude, seeking their guidance. Robert Davis kissing his secretary in the conference room, saying it was just kissing. How could it just be kissing? If there hadn't been further actions, would the board have agreed to my demand for Robert Davis to make a public statement? There were several expensive pieces of equipment in the public conference room, and the surveillance video was running 24 hours a day. I guess he and the secretary were too excited and forgot the cameras were there. As long as I make this public, the reporters will figure out how to get the evidence themselves. Robert Davis was breathing heavily. His glare was fierce, as if he wanted to devour me. But was I afraid men who cheat? If you don't punish them, they won't realize they're wrong. Perhaps not expecting me to have such solid evidence, Robert Davis and his lawyer went aside to confer. As long as the written reprimand was in my hands, the fact that he was the at-fault spouse was undeniable. After a while, the two returned. The lawyer said, Ms. Reed, Mr. Davis is willing to be somewhat accommodating out of consideration for your marriage of over a decade. He agrees to a 60-40 split of all assets. You take 60%. I stood up. No deal. Let's go to court. My lawyer, who finally had a bit of presence, can prepare the complaint. No need, Robert Davis roared. I knew him well. He valued his pride more than his life. For a CEO to be sued by his wife for cheating, with the most powerful evidence being a written reprimand he wrote himself, wouldn't that be worse than killing him? Robert Davis said through clenched teeth, fine, as you said. No stocks, no funds, no cars, and no company shares in your name. Just cash and houses. Okay, I quickly added. Robert Davis's veins were practically popping, but he still gritted his teeth and nodded. I immediately motioned for my lawyer to bring over the contract. It was clear this contract had been prepared long ago. After signing, Robert Davis and I went straight to finalize the divorce. The entire process took less than 15 minutes. I didn't look at him once. What was there to see? A month later, our divorce certificate came through smoothly. It coincided perfectly with the grand opening of my new store. With so many good things happening, how could I not celebrate? I opened a fitness apparel and equipment store. The highlight, of course, was the fashion show. Healthy and vibrant young men and women, dressed in fitness wear, running gear, and yoga outfits, performed aerobics or a muscle demonstration, instantly bringing the atmosphere to a climax. The event was quite successful. There was sure to be a small peak in foot traffic later, combined with promotions and discounts. It was bound to be a hit. I was happily calculating the potential earnings for the day when a cold gust of wind suddenly hit me. I instinctively dodged, only to see a figure stumble and rush past me, nearly tripping and falling flat on her face. She missed her slap. I steadied myself and turned around. Sarah Reed, how dare you dodge? It was Robert's mother, Eleanor. Eleanor, are you here to work out too? What are you doing here? Though I think you should probably see a doctor about your head first. Why are you walking so unsteadily? Robert's mother, Eleanor, was livid, her face pale. She pointed at me and yelled, Sarah Reed, you shameless woman. Our Robert Davis supported you for 8 years, and you still took so much of his money. Aren't you ashamed? Why would I be ashamed? I said with an earnest expression. Robert Davis said back then that if he cheated, he'd divorce himself. I even left him a portion of the assets. Robert's mother, Eleanor, trembled uncontrollably and lunged at me, trying to hit me. But was I someone who could be easily hit? The gym's bodyguards blocked her path, flexing their muscular chests and biceps. She, however, forcefully kicked over the cartoon statue in front of my store entrance. Amidst a shattering sound, she sat on the ground, crying and yelling. People around quickly pulled out their phones to record videos. I've got a hot tip. Robert Davis's mother, Eleanor, from Pinnacle Tech, is yelling in City Center Square. The stuff she's saying is explosive. Come quick. Reporters would arrive soon, in 5 minutes at most. Sarah Reed, you bitch. You'll get what's coming to you. Robert's mother, Eleanor, scrambled up from the ground. Still yelling at me, she hobbled away. I shook my head. Just as she left, the outdoor event ended, and the crowd started pouring into the store. When the officer arrived, Robert Davis and I were sitting facing each other. You two can talk this out yourselves first. Robert Davis suppressed his anger. Sarah Reed, how can you be so ruthless? My mother is so old, how could you bully her like this? Just because she's old, she can smash things and not pay for them. Robert Davis suppressed his rage. She's my mother. Exactly. That's why I called you to pay, isn't it? I felt like Robert Davis's IQ had dropped since we divorced. Robert Davis looked at me as if I were being unreasonable and angrily said, My mother just accidentally bumped into your broken glass statue. Do you really need to report her to the police station? I turned to the officer. I've provided the store's surveillance video to you. She intentionally kicked my statue. The officer nodded and explained the situation to Robert Davis. Eleanor deliberately damaged someone else's property. The surveillance video is very clear. Otherwise, we wouldn't have called you here. How much do you want? Not much, just 20 million. Robert Davis's eyes widened instantly. Sarah Reed, are you robbing me? That expensive? Robert Davis clutched the copy of the receipt in his hand, his voice squeezed out through gritted teeth. Are you sick? You just casually put something worth 20 million at the store entrance. I looked at him, puzzled. My property. Do I need your permission to decide where to put it? If an agreement on compensation can be reached, you can go through the settlement agreement process, and the suspect will not be held criminally liable. If an out-of-court settlement cannot be reached, then it will have to proceed as a criminal case. Robert Davis's face was ashen. I don't have that much money on hand. But what does that have to do with me? I stood up and bowed to the officer. I'll leave the rest to you. Destruction of property. Just wait for the police to come for you. He panted heavily. I'll give you the money. Let's get the settlement paperwork done first. I turned back without hesitation. You pay first. Ridiculous. He was nothing to me. Why would I indulge him? Robert Davis's eyes were red, as if he wanted to eat me alive. He stared at me for a full 10 seconds. Then he turned his head and went outside to make a call. 30 minutes later, 20 million was deposited. I efficiently completed the out-of-court settlement agreement process. The officer released Robert's mother, Eleanor, from temporary detention. After just a few hours, the old woman looked as if she had aged 10 years. She rushed out and threw herself onto Robert Davis, weeping dramatically. Robert Davis wore a look of heartfelt concern. "Don't ever do this again. Impulse is the devil." I was clearly trying to comfort her, so why did Robert's mother, Eleanor, start howling even louder? With the 20 million, I traveled around outside the city for a while. That broken glass statue was big and expensive, and it took up space just sitting by the door. I regretted buying it as soon as I brought it home. It was all because I was in a bad mood after seeing Robert Davis's revolting behavior in his office, so I bought it impulsively. I had wanted to get rid of it for a long time. Now that I had sold it back to Robert Davis at the original price, how could I not be happy? After returning from my trip, another familiar face appeared at my store. When I saw Robert's father, Richard, I almost thought I was mistaken. I had never met a more hypocritical old man. When Robert Davis was starting his business, he praised me for being capable and for being able to share hardship and success with Robert Davis. After Robert Davis's business became successful, he started saying I was not fulfilling her wifely duties, a woman who was working outside the home every day. My live-in housekeeper made a substantial meal for every meal. Were they blind not to see it? However, seeing Robert Davis constantly stressed and conflicted between me and his parents, I eventually felt sorry for him. So I simply withdrew from the company, resigned from my executive position, and only kept my company shares. After leaving the company, I didn't want to be idle. I partnered with someone to open a brand apparel store. On the opening day, just like with the current fitness store, I organized a fashion show featuring tall, long-legged male models. Just when the event was at its peak, Robert's mother, Eleanor, suddenly appeared, rushed onto the stage, and pointed at me, yelling about working outside the home, being indecent, having unclear relationships with men, and saying that my business partner was also a bad influence, leading me astray. I still remember the expression of my partner at that time, surprised, angry, confused, looking at me with pity and sympathy, as if unable to comprehend how I could have such a mother-in-law. I withdrew from the partnership of that store the next day, returning to the family under Robert's mother, Eleanor's triumphant gaze. After that, whenever I wanted to go out and work, Robert's mother, Eleanor, would use the same tactics to sabotage it. It wasn't until I stopped trying to develop my own career and instead spent my days meeting for coffee, shopping, and spa treatments with the wives of Robert Davis's business partners that Robert's mother, Eleanor, finally quieted down, even saying triumphantly, "That's what a woman should do." Ever since I completely became a full-time housewife, the old man never looked at me properly again. He put on airs, acting as if the times he used to smile at me and praise me for being smart and capable, the times he said I was the one who could help Robert Davis, were not him at all. I couldn't help but be surprised that such an old man would condescend to seek me out. "Old man, are you here for a workout?" I said warmly. "Welcome, welcome." Robert's father, Richard's, old face stiffened. He even forgot what he was going to say. "Old man," he repeated, incredulous. The old man had taught in a village, using a ruler used for punishment to hit students' palms. In reality, he wasn't very learned, but he considered himself cultured and refined, spending his days messing with his books and cultured pursuits, wanting people to respectfully call him Professor or Mr. Davis Sr. Others, out of consideration for Robert Davis, indulged his preference. I used to call him Dad. Now that we were divorced, he probably expected me to call him Mr. Davis Sr. like others. Mr. Davis Sr. could never have imagined that the first word out of my mouth would be old. Those two words dragged his carefully cultivated image as a cultured man through the mud. "Well, of course," I explained enthusiastically. "You're getting on in years, and I respect my elders, so I have to call you old man." I explained warmly, then kindly advised him, "Old man, you're a bit late to start exercising at your age. Don't waste your money. Just go back and try joining those neighborhood dance groups, public group exercise." With every old man, I uttered, Robert's father, Richard's, face turned greener, almost deathly. He most despised the old men and old women joining those neighborhood dance groups, public group exercise on the streets. And I was telling him to go do that. He glared at me fiercely, took a few deep breaths, but managed to suppress his emotions and speak. Sarah Reed, it's useless for a woman like you to hold company shares. Transfer your shares to Robert Davis. I have to say, Robert's father, Richard, was on a higher level than Robert's mother, Eleanor. Even like this, he hadn't forgotten the purpose of his visit. No wonder Robert's mother, Eleanor, could only be the firecracker out front, while this old man brewed trouble behind the scenes. Robert's father, Richard, had always spoken to me imperiously over the years, and today was no different, starting with an imperative sentence, a direct command. But who did this old geezer think he was? Isn't this just perfect? I actually don't want those shares. I agreed wholeheartedly. Honestly, what the old man said aligned with my own plans. Whether the process of achieving it would be the same, I couldn't guarantee. Robert's father, Richard, clearly didn't think that far ahead. He was extremely satisfied with my attitude, and even the resentment from being called old man lessened a bit. His expression softened. He nodded, looking at me as if I were teachable. Consider yourself sensible. I'll have Robert Davis contact you. The old man walked away with his hands behind his back. I immediately sent a group message to the company's largest shareholders, share transfer, pre-purchase, reshaping Robert Davis. By the time Robert Davis got the news, I had already been in contact with several shareholders. He rushed to me, furious. Sarah Reed, what do you mean by this? I looked utterly innocent. Just selling shares. What else could it mean? Robert Davis fumed. You clearly told my dad you'd transfer the shares to me for free. What do you mean contacting other people now? I held quite a few shares, and they were all original shares. With the company going public, my shares would have a significant impact on the company's controlling interest. I looked at Robert Davis in shock. Robert Davis, did you hit your head? I just said I didn't want the shares. Which word said I'd give them to Robert Davis, let alone for free? I earnestly advised Robert Davis, are you so short on cash that you can't afford food, suffering from malnutrition and brain atrophy? Giving you original shares for free or dreaming if you think that's possible. Maybe you should see a doctor. Don't worry about the cost. As a favor for being married, I'll pay. Robert Davis's forehead veins pulsed. He glared at me, trying to figure out if I was serious or just trying to annoy him. However, after seeing at least 5 shareholders call me within 20 minutes to discuss the share transfer, he finally couldn't contain himself. He said through gritted teeth, I can buy those shares too. Of course you can. Robert Davis is a shareholder too, why wouldn't he be able to buy them? I immediately put on a smile, my attitude eager. If you wanted to buy shares, you should have said so earlier. Let's negotiate a price. The company was about to go public, and original shares were at their most valuable. As soon as I announced I was selling, people kept contacting me. There were shareholders, investors, and speculators hoping to get in at the last minute. We negotiated several rounds, and the price reached a very desirable state. For Robert Davis to get my shares, he would have to offer a higher price. The negotiation process was tedious and boring. I had only one principle regarding the shares: highest bidder wins. Finally, when Robert Davis, with bloodshot eyes, quoted a price I was satisfied with, I smiled and agreed to sell the shares to him.